Let's talk about good governance in public sector. And of course, we have one big story on our hands to be the template, what we call the poster boy for good governance. What should be good governance in the public sector? Let's bring in Oji Udemeze, who is a founder, partner, and chief executive at Flame Academy and Consultants, the management consultant. Good morning. It's good to have you.
Good morning,
first time meeting here.
Happy New Year.
2018. And of course, I'd like to have your first word on public sector governance, because we're all in the hands of the government. So the government is a big brother. We live, eat, sleep, and work, leisure, within the space that every government provides. So what's your first word?
My first word is that without proper governance, which sits on fairness, accountability, independence, and transparency, no organization, be it a private organization or public organization or a nation, can move forward. And until Nigeria gets governance processes and systems and structures right, nothing will work in this nation. We are a great giant that is sleeping, inactive, and only potent. We need to activate our potentials by ensuring proper governance in every area of government.
What you do on a daily basis, you interact with the financial services industry, and I'm sure you have a fair idea of how regulatory issues and governance issues are looked at within that sector, isn't it?
The only thing, that makes organizations prosper and achieve their short-term and long-term objectives is ensuring that things are done properly. That's when you talk about governance. Governance is becoming a great issue around the whole world, not just in private entities, but in public institutions. And you hear a lot about governance, risk, and compliance, because risk management has become embedded, in what must make organizations succeed. And unfortunately, and it makes me cry each time I look at Nigeria, we don't apply any hint or sense of risk management in most of the things that we do. Today, for example, Nigeria is sitting on a very big gunpowder called the oil price, where once the price drops, we go gaga, we just get crazy. It's a major risk management issue. And yet, over the decades, we haven't tried to address that issue. We are just moving about now, happy, things are, big budget, revenue, projections. People are just, only because the oil price just rallied up, around $67 per barrel. Trust me, if it just drops again for whatever geopolitics or whatever, Russia, US, part also, or even the shale oil production, assuming that maybe because about this price now, shale production will become again very profitable. Assuming that politics goes on and US decides to, push a lot of oil to the market, we go back to square one. It's a risk management problem. Any organization that's not run with a proper understanding of the forces, events, and activities that may derail it from achieving its objective, that's what you call risk management, that organization cannot make progress. So when you talk about governance, you're talking about the structures, the systems, the processes, that enable the affairs of an institution, government or public or private institution, to be, managed and handled effectively. And it's very critical.
Do you think we need a code, a governance code for the public sector in Nigeria?
It is more than needed. And very fortunately, we have these codes. We have laws. We have statutes, enactments of the legislature.
Or the parliament.
And we have several regulations that give force, and make provisions for for these laws to, have effect. But what we lack is appropriate, framework to ensure that these policies, these, regulations are brought into effect. And that is where there's a big problem. Now, when you talk about governance, you talk about, how organizations are run. And then the primary, responsibility for governance, rests on who? The board of an institution. If you're talking about a private institution, talking about the board of, the board of that institution, where shareholders are represented, executive board, non-executive board, independent board members. For a nation like Nigeria, when you talk about the board governing this country and a public institution, you talk about the Federal Executive Council, which is the highest
governing
body in this country. And if you talk about the parastatals, when you talk about Nigerian Customs Service or the Nigerian Immigration Service, NNPC, FRS,
Port Authority.
FIRS, Port Authority, all of these very critical revenue generating agencies of government. The only way you can get them to give us the revenue to run our budget and make this country prosper is if they are governed properly. And what does that mean? That we put the right people in place.
On those boards?
It starts from there. Who are the chairmen of this board? Well, of course, we have had these institutions even run without any governance, without any institution, without any board. You know that over the past few years, we've had acting chairman here, acting director here, no proper board of governance for this institution, almost in the past how many years? That is a no-no. That is a recipe for disaster and failure. Now, assuming we're going to have these guys, we saw the list that, had some issues around dead people and all of that that came up,
Yes.
Now, okay, let me leave all of those controversies and talk about who are these people in these,
on the board of these parastatals.
How are they selected? Are they selected based on political patronage, or are they selected based on their competence and ability to run these institutions? If you take an example of maybe the central bank and the Capital Market Authority, that's our SEC, where we have some bit of sanity and things going well. If you look at all of the success, it's all about governance. And like I said earlier, governance rests on some critical principles. One, fairness. These board members, are they fair to the stakeholders? You and I are stakeholders in this project called Nigeria. Do people act with our interest at heart, primarily? Or do they have vested interests that run counter to the interests of the nation?
In terms of what? Procurement?
In terms of procurement,
contract?
Handling contract, fiscal responsibility, managing our funds the way we plan to manage them. If we make budgets, are those budgets genuinely planned? And do we execute this? It's shameful. You were discussing infrastructure a few minutes ago, and we say, we were pushing to get infrastructure on. But how can you explain a nation that, budgets 20–30% to capital expenditure, even though that is low compared to our medium-term expenditure framework target? But at the end of the day, what happens at the end of the year? We've had nothing more than 4%, 5% execution, actual implementation of these budgets. That's terrorism, if I put it that way.